Welcome to another installment of Real Steel Sports with your wonderful host James Krasnerick, who is here for the fourth of 5 top 10s this week dedicated to Super Bowl / Hall of Fame week. On Monday, I analyzed 10 greatest games to have ever been played in Super Bowl history. On Tuesday, I went through my list of the 10 greatest players that have not yet been inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Then last night, Wednesday, I revealed my list of the 10 greatest single-season teams to have fallen short of hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. Now, for tonight's list. When it comes to professional football, there's an old adage. Offense sells tickets, but defense wins championships. And that could be said of both Super Bowl 47 participants, the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers. Not only are these two teams noted for their defense, but many previous NFL teams before them that have played in the big game have been prided on being ferocious, offensive stifling units. So for tonight's list, I'm going to give you my list of the 10 greatest defenses in league history. Let's start off number 10, the Doomsday Defense, the Dallas Cowboys of the 1970s. When you think of the Cowboys of that era, you think of Hall of Fame quarterback Roger Staubach, running back Tony Dorsett, and the dangerous weapons that they had, like wide receiver Drew Pearson. They had a pretty decent offensive line anchored by Hall of Fame right tackle Rayfield Wright. But the defense was maybe the most underappreciated in league history. They were a very, very good stout unit against the run, very, very stout against the run, and against the pass they were very, very effective as well. From 1970 to 1979, the Doomsday Defense allowed 16.1 points per game. Now, for a 10-year stretch, that's pretty damn good. The team was loaded with talent. You had Pro Bowlers such as linebacker Chuck Halley, who was the MVP of Super Bowl V, the only player on the losing team to receive that honor. You had defensive ends Ed Too Tall Jones and Harvey Martin. And then you had the Hall of Famers. We had safety Mel Renfro, defensive tackle Randy White, and Bob Lilly, who are among the top two or three greatest at their position in league history. Super Bowl VI versus Miami, they became the only team in the Super Bowl history to not allow an opponent to score a touchdown, as they won 24-3. And then 6 years later, against Denver in Super Bowl XII in New Orleans, the site of this year's game, they crushed the Denver Broncos 27-10. What made Dallas good was they were a very intelligent defense. I mean, their head coach was Tom Landry, who was a very, very good offensive mastermind, but in terms of putting together a defense, there might not have been anybody better. Tom Landry, one of the pioneers of the 4-3 defense, was the first coach really to drop a player off the line of scrimmage from a 5-man front to a 4-man front and add a middle linebacker. And what it allowed was the defense to be faster and more athletic. And you saw it in several defenses in the NFL at that time, particularly Dallas. They were very quick to the ball, very good at taking the football away. I mean, you wouldn't think of them as a physical unit until you looked up on the scoreboard and realized you hadn't gained a lot of rushing yards, or the battle of being physical was won, and you hadn't gained a lot of points either when you called them soft. They'd laugh at that, and then they would just kick your opponent's ass on Sunday. They're not any higher on the list because I think they were a lot more of an offensive team, but the defense was clearly one of the best in league history to make this list. I mean, some of the defenses I could have put on this list, defenses of a certain era, like whether it be the Steelers of the mid-2000s to early 2010s, or even some of the 49er defenses in the late 80s, early 90s, or even the Giants defense that won Super Bowl 21 over the Broncos. But what makes Dallas's defense worthy of being a top 10 was that it was a huge integral part of that team, but that they're very underrated in the fact they had 3 Hall of Famers and allow 16 points per game over a 10-year stretch is pretty impressive. Moving right on down the list, go up northeast to one of Dallas's chief rivals. Number 9 on our list, the Madison Avenue Giants, New York Giants from 1956 to 1963. They were the pioneers, if you will, of the 4-3 alignment. Now, Tom Landry may have perfected it in Dallas, but he designed it in New York as a defensive coordinator. because at the time they had to stop Jim Brown's Cleveland Browns. Jim Brown was the greatest single player in league history, and just an absolute beast of a runner, and the Giants had to find a way to stop him. And the 4-3 gave them the best chance. From an 8-year period, the New York Giants allowed 17.7 points per game, which is a very, very, very impressive run. They had very, very good players in that defense, several good ones. 3 Hall of Famers, including linebacker Sam Huff, one of the best middle linebackers in the game, one of the most physical in the history of the game. Defensive end Andy Robustelli was a very, very talented pass rusher, and he had one of the greatest interceptors in league history, cornerback Emlyn Tunnell. The only NFL title they won in that period, and the only reason they're not higher on that list, this is the years before the Super Bowl, was in '56 when they beat the Bears 47-7. They lost the NFL championship game to the Colts in 1958 and '59, and they also lost it in 1963 against the Green Bay Packers. It was 1962, pardon me. 1962 against the Packers and 63 against the Bears. So they lost several NFL championships in that span. And the defense has played okay, but definitely not the standards you're used to seeing in the regular season. Were they a top 10 NFL all-time defense? Absolutely. But to put them any higher, I think the number 9, I think, would be kind of dumb. Maybe 8th at best, but I think 9th is right where they belong. Because where they were very, very good, they only won 1 title. Still a hell of a unit, though. Moving on to number 8. The first defense from one single season to appear in this list, the Pewter Pirates, the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the masters of the Tampa 2. The Tampa 2 defense is designed to stop opponents' passing games. The middle linebacker drops deeper than he normally would to defend a deep pass. And the Buccaneers ran that defense to perfection. Statistically, 12.3 points per game in 2002, allowed 252.75 yards per game, allowed 155.6 passing yards per game. They allowed 10 touchdown passes all season. Incredibly high, incredibly low total, while recording 31 picks, which was best in the league. Their opponents barely completed 50% of their passes, and the defense throughout the regular season and the playoffs scored 9 defensive touchdowns, including 5 picks in Super Bowl 37 against the Oakland Raiders. This defense from top to bottom was loaded with Pro Bowlers. They had a Pro Bowler at every phase of their defense, whether it be defensive lineman Warren Sapp and defensive end Simeon Rice with 15.5 sacks. Linebackers Derek Brooks, who was the Defensive Player of the Year, and middle linebacker Shelton Quarles, or safety John Lynch. Again, this team from top to bottom was loaded, and they won Super Bowl 37 against the Oakland Raiders 48-21. Now, there's a case to be made for the Bucs to be higher and for the Bucs to be lower. Lower because you think of John Gruden, the head coach, his knowledge of the Raiders' offense in that Super Bowl because he was the coach for the Raiders the previous year. But in retrospect, you have to realize that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' defense was dominant. In 3 playoff games, they allowed 12.3 points per game, and against 3 of the best offenses in the league: San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Oakland. You can make a case to move them up higher, but number 8 on the list is where they belong. They were a very, very stout unit. They were underrated. They were very good against the run, too, finishing 5th against the run. And there really was no way to move the football on this team. I mean, you even saw it. Did the Gruden knowledge help a lot in Super Bowl 37? Yeah, it did. But, I think the defense of the Bucs would have figured it out anyway, because they made it to that Super Bowl absolutely crushing any offense that they went against. I mean, you saw what they did to some of the best offenses in the league. They stifled Green Bay. They stifled Oakland. They stifled Minnesota. They did the same thing. The Saints and the Panthers had some good teams. You know what? They absolutely shut teams down that year. So it wasn't like it was just an anomaly that they just picked off the Raiders 5 times in the Super Bowl. They were a damn good defense from start to finish, and they deserve to be on this list. All right, coming up next, we got 3 defenses. One of them, you'll wonder how even made this list, and 2 of them, some of the best teams in league history. Stay tuned.